Welcome back to the side stories for Between the Ashes for Freespace 2 here on Paladin Gaming. They're coming fast now. We're just post the 15th mission. It's Draco or whatever it was. Entitled Belief. The Light and New Alliance was largely a Terran endeavor and counted few Vasudans among its number. Even so, on a habitat as large as Amanu Station, few could still be a respectable number, and they'd made accommodations. With increasing numbers of Hammer of Light officers joining the fight against INEDAM, this proved fortunate. They could be quartered directly on the station and their ships integrated into the LNA's air wing. From a military preparedness perspective, the upsides were obvious. From a personnel perspective, the analysis was more complex. The Sekhmet pilot recognized a small group of Terrans sitting together. They'd flown together earlier that day, exploring the Dositov cloud and ultimately engaging an enemy destroyer. It had been a long, grueling mission, and the pilot and his wingmate hoped to unwind in Amanu's pilot's cafeteria. They joked with their squad mates about INEDAM 01 being only the second most dangerous thing they'd reconnoiter that day. Now they felt as though every eye in the place were watching them, and the jokes seemed less amusing. The pilot felt a surge of hope as the Terran pilot made some sort of gesture, of recognition or greeting perhaps. He was pretty sure it was female, although the Terran concept of gender was something many Vasudans found confusing. The idea that some people had organs to produce offspring their entire lives rather than only when they were called for seemed strange and inefficient. And then there were social norms based on it, and Terrans whose gender wasn't what their organs would suggest. Their society was moribund. The destroyers would return one day and see to that. Nevertheless, the pilot was curious. He repeated the Terran's greeting, holding up the middle finger of his right hand, and she ran from the room, followed soon after by her companions. "If I may," said his wingmate, "that appears to have been a mistake." The Antares flagged Rockhopper, ice cream for breakfast, was supposed to have a more dignified name, but the owner's 10-year-old child had other ideas. Once she'd convinced her older sister, the outcome was inevitable. The ship was a Kronos-class freighter modified with a launcher for mining charges and a hopper to collect ore. She wasn't much to look at, and some days her ancient jump drive struggled with her heavy loads. Still, to her crew, a wife and husband and their 2 children, she was an opportunity. Oh no. Over the years, as they worked on the old ship, she started to feel like a home. Eventually, they had an insignia of a mug of coffee beside an ice cream sundae painted on the bow, much to the embarrassment of the now 13-year-old who'd first suggested that name. It was 1 week from the child's 18th birthday when disaster struck. Disaster, in this case, being the call sign of a notorious pirate who'd chosen it specifically for the pun. Oh. They were after a shipment of bio-grade nanofabrication equipment and didn't accept the ice cream's pleas that they'd targeted the wrong ship. The ship's owner had executed a crash jump, throwing the ship into subspace without properly warming up the drives or calculating a destination. She was killed when the sudden acceleration threw her into a bulkhead, but it bought her family time to abandon ship. They drifted there for a long time, the children and their father, long enough for the faulty seal in his EVA suit to become a problem. Rosemary yelled down the hallway at her squad mates retreating back. "Charon, did you flip off?" she began. Fortunately for everyone involved, Hermes cut her off. "Whoa there," she said. "You really don't want to go down this road right now." So we're going back and forth between perspectives. Wonder how they'll come together. Taking an apprenticeship with Bell Tower Security wasn't only a way to secure an income now that theirs had been shot out from under them, and their mother's life insurance payouts were going to their father's medical bills. The sisters had decided on it with little fanfare. More than a job, they needed payback. The recruiter had seemed somewhat dubious about that explanation, but living and working on a scrappy freighter for 8 years had taught them plenty about spacecraft. They nailed their interviews and skill tests. They worked as deck crew long enough until spots opened up in the company's pilot training program. They were determined and graduated quickly. This is our wingmates from Antares. Over the years, as conditions in Antares worsened and the demand for private security grew, they found plenty of opportunities to hone their skills. When Bell Tower's flagship, the Decisive Wind, was critically damaged responding to a pirate attack on Golnara Research Station. Oh man, I blew that up in I blew up the Decisive Wind in Mephistopheles, the demo 2 mission mini campaign, like years ago. Golnara Research Station, they left to form their own company. Charon's Irregulars, named after the call sign the older of the two had picked up during their time with Bell Tower. Her sister, riffing off of the mythological psychopomp, soon started to call herself Hermes. The Irregulars soon found themselves torn between 3 competing forces. the nascent Antares Federation, Admiral Poe and his fleet, and the Hammer of Light. They'd chosen to stay neutral, focusing on keeping civilians safe. That attitude lasted until September of that year. A Hammer of Light transport managed to dock with and board the ship they'd been hired to protect, all while Admiral Poe's fighters sat there doing absolutely nothing useful. The sound of the transport's crew dying in agony on open comm would stay with them the rest of their lives. Outnumbered and outgunned, there was nothing they could do but save themselves. That didn't happen in a mission I was flying, I guarantee it. That very day, the irregulars signed on with the Antares Federation. They would be neutral no more. The following months were long and grueling, and by the end of it, the 10-pilot company was down to 4. They'd almost come to blows over the Federation's non-aggression pact with the Hammer. To 2 of the pilots, it was a golden opportunity to make peace and focus on the Alliance. To Charon and Hermes, who'd lost their family and livelihood to a bully on a power trip, it was appeasement. They knew that defecting from the Federation to the Alliance would make them forever unwelcome in the system. They also knew that the Federation had crossed a line they couldn't overlook. Admiral Poe's fleet had lost too many pilots to turn them away, and when the Intrepid ultimately withdrew, Charon and Hermes went with her. Oh boy. So that is in fact exactly how it comes together. Rosemary found Charon in Amanu's gym, just where Hermes had told her she'd be, beating up a punching bag, since her sparring partner had recently become part of Wayfarer's debris field. She stood a respectful distance back, waiting for a good opportunity. Charon, however, had other ideas. "If you're here to talk about how I feel, you picked a bad time." There was ice in her voice, and Rosemary thought she sounded defensive, not angry. Not angry exactly, but like there was hurt there. Rosemary held up a hand in a conciliatory gesture. "I haven't," Rosemary said. "I came here to apologize for my outburst earlier. It wasn't appropriate, and I'm sorry." "You're damn right it wasn't appropriate." Charon turned away to deliver a fierce right hook into the punching bag. It writhed like a dying snake. "They're asking us to work with terrorists." Left hook. Charon's voice was cold, almost unemotional. All her fury was in her fists, and they were unrelenting. "They slaughtered Antares." Right hook. "They attacked medical ships, civilian habitats, mining stations. They shelled a refugee station." Left, right, left, right. The punching bag fell off its stand, and Charon finally turned to face Rosemary. "I lost people in every fight. People under my protection. Friends from other companies. My own pilots. Do you know what I felt after Wayfarer, when we got the news about Mav?" Charon silently watched Rosemary until she shook her head. "Nothing. Nothing at all. I thought I'd become numb to atrocity, but this? Hosting that on this station? That is crossing a line." She set about righting the fallen bag, leaving Rosemary alone for a moment with her thoughts. "Susan." Charon paused, turning her attention back towards Rosemary. Pilot call signs were like nicknames. Using another pilot's real name was unusual, and Charon had been with the Navy long enough to internalize it. "You know you're not the only one who's lost people, don't you? I'm from Ross 128. I joined up in memory of my family on Riviera Station." "Not a lot of Shivans enlightened," Charon said. "Just hubris and innocent people in its way." She started to turn away again, but Rosemary pressed on before she could. "That's true. The galaxy's gotten a lot more complicated lately, hasn't it? Some days I'm not so sure where I'm going. My faith talks about exploration and the wonders of the galaxy as our birthright. Well, we've seen the wonders of the galaxy, and they're not quite as wonderful as the prophet expected." She paused, then before adding, "I don't just mean the Shivans." Charon finally seemed to lose interest in the punching bag, turning her attention fully on Rosemary. "Canna," she asked. She almost sounded like she was pleading. "Are you going somewhere with this?" "I'm an Umbrus, sir. We're always going somewhere." Rosemary flashed her gentle smile. Charon couldn't quite bring herself to return it, so she nodded instead. "Everyone in this squadron has something or other going on. Mart's got his criminal record, and I think some kind of trauma about it. Az hit the bottle after bombing out of grad school. Skunk, I think, has some kind of deep regret he doesn't... Yeah, you've seen it too. Do you remember what you told Az after we fought off those pirates leaving Ross 128? Charon nodded. "I suggested he talk to Wayfarer's counselor." "I don't know, Canna. I'll think about it." "It's up to you, Susan. But one way or another, you don't have to do this on your own. The squadron's been through hell together. We can take care of each other, if you'll let us." Charon let a wry laugh at that. "That might be easier said than done. But, yeah, I'll think about that." Rosemary didn't immediately answer that. Instead, she went to pick up the fallen punching bag, and Charon instinctively moved to help her. Together, the two of them got it set back up. "Susan, you ever play caps? Mart's games tonight, and I'm sure he could be happy to deal you in." "Well, it's not like I had any other plans," Charon said. For the first time since they'd met, Rosemary saw her smile. So that was the sixth side story for Between the Ashes here on Paladin Gaming. You know, I don't know if there are side stories for Slaves to Chaos. I'll have to replay it and check. I'm not going to replay it again for the channel, but I'll replay it to see if there are any unlocks. Because I've had to change pilot files since I played it the first time, so it doesn't remember that I have completed the other campaign. So anyway, this was the sixth side story for Between the Ashes here on Paladin Gaming. This is Paladin Gaming, signing off.